Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. I don't have the opening. Anyway, we're here to talk about football. Might as well talk about the Super Bowl. And I guess, David, let me see. Okay, so I don't know. When I was watching the game, I don't know how you feel about it. Were you Did you miss the fact that you couldn't see the American commercials? I'll start there because that's probably the biggest
Hold on,
reason why
hold
the
on, hold
majority
on.
of the people watch the game.
We're not even going to acknowledge the fact that is a certain somebody's birthday today, and
No,
I'm
it's okay.
no, we have to because it didn't clue into me right away when you said, "Can we do the show a little bit later tonight?" I'm going out for dinner, like, but usually Monday's pizza night for Frank. What's going on here? And then I'm not one to usually remember to check my dates for birthday. So first off, happy
Hmm.
birthday, Frank.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So when it comes to the commercials, you know what? No, because I can watch the commercials afterwards anyways. Like they're up. It'd be nice if I didn't have to watch all 52 of them after the fact. Yes. Um but yeah, I know it's a big part of it because these guys, hey, God, how much money is spent? I think it was $7 million for the ad spot for the
$7.5 million for 30 seconds.
just absolutely. So just think about it. There was roughly, let's say, 50 commercials at $7.5 million each,
Just for the commercials.
just to get your commercial on air. Like, how unreal is that? That's almost 300. Like, that's close to, let's say, $375 million in commercial. Like, there's a reason why the Super. Like, when people ask, when everybody asks me what's the big deal about the Super Bowl, I say, look at the fact that companies spend a ridiculous amount to not only get their advertisements onto the Super Bowl, but how much money the broadcasters fight over to get themselves there because it's between NBC, CBS, and Fox. I don't think I'm trying to remember now. I don't think ESPN has done a Super Bowl. So I
Well,
think
that would be ABC doing it.
yeah, ABC technically. I don't remember the last time ABC broadcast the Super Bowl. But it's just unreal. Like that, the game is. I mean, the commercials themselves have actually been getting better. I will say, some of them have been getting better. When it comes, some of them are still. I call it, we young people like to call them cringe because they make you cringe when you watch them. I don't. I haven't seen all of them to give a definite like which one was my favorite or which one did I not like. If I had to give an early look at my favorite one, there was one with PK Subban and Joe Thornton trying to trying to record things on an iPhone. I thought that one was pretty good. Then
Let's finish something you were saying. You're asking about ABC. So the Super Bowl is returning to ABC for the first time since 2006.
wow, that long.
The NFL announced on Thursday that it signed long-term agreements with, here's one you didn't say and you'll be surprised to hear, Amazon, CBS, ESPN/ABC because they're the same company, Fox and NBC. ABC will host the Super Bowl in 2026 and 2030 in the latest deal that they made.
Hmm.
So that's it's a long time since they 17 years since they had one. It'll be 2006, 226. That's 20 years. Exactly 20 years between broadcasts.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to get that slide that in. So you were talking about the commercials, the specific commercials. As far as well, as far as the commercials go, the general consensus was the in America. Did you see any of the American commercials?
I saw some of them. Yeah. Yeah, I saw some of them.
There was the Clueless, the On Hold Bud Light, the Hellman's commercial, Breaking Bad or Good, and the best triangle player Doritos. And if you didn't get a chance to see them, folks, they were stupid. They were stupid. They weren't as good as I remember them. I guess because I'm kind of prejudiced. I like horses and dogs. Those were always my favorite. Were the Budweiser commercials. That
Oh,
that
Budweiser. Yeah, I was. Budweiser has always been. I would call it the king of Super Bowl commercials. Them. I think GM has usually done some pretty good ones. Yeah, I know, but Budweiser. There was the one with the horses. I can't remember what year that was. They've had like funny ones, good ones, like
cute ones.
and like inspiring, kind of like
Yeah,
just
there's been those too.
deep. Yeah.
All right, so I didn't get to see any of those commercials. They had them on the local Canadian ones. They had some interesting commercials, but I was at a Super Bowl party, so um, watching the commercials was an opportunity to get something else to eat. So that's it. I just the commercials are something that everybody talks about, and then of course there's Rihanna and what she did, pregnant and all, the floating concert, if you will.
Was I the only one that thought when I saw her noticed the belly, but didn't want to say anything in the
No, I
soup?
don't think so. I think everybody knows she's pregnant.
Okay, I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
found out after.
she's pregnant. She's pregnant, and she's not pregnant a couple of weeks. Uh, I'm seeing myself. What I see there, I figure we're looking at 5 or 6 at least.
Well, you know better than me.
I've seen it a few times, so yeah, I might know better than you only in that sense. But still, she was great. I couldn't really listen to the music because I was at a party and there were 30 people there and it was pretty noisy. And the only thing I could tell was what the concert looked like that she put together, and it looked really good. Like it looked well put together, and I got to tell you, Danger Pay had to be part of what the dancers were getting because they were dancing on those platforms, and she was tied down.
Yeah,
I'm
they
not
were.
sure they were.
I think they were all tethered.
Were they tethered too?
I think they all had to be. Like, there's no way. The NFL. I don't know if the NFL has quite a bit of control over these Super Bowl halftime shows to a certain degree. I know there were some issues with last year's show and almost made it very, very tough and almost didn't happen. But I do remember, I do know the NFL, they walk a pretty tight rope when it comes to these shows, and that there's no way none of those people involved aren't tethered, because the last thing the NFL wants is to have a disaster. Let's not forget, what was it, Justin Timberlake all those years ago.
Oh, geez.
Like,
But that
the
wasn't it.
NFL was
That wasn't dangerous though.
no, but the NFL got it was not a good
They
look.
got a black eye.
Exactly. So for a fact the NFL is making sure that you're doing something like that, you're we're gonna have a little more control and making sure that we're not gonna be liable for somebody falling off. Like those, that was high.
Yep.
Oh, but you know what? I will say probably the most visually incredible halftime performances I've ever watched at the Super Bowl. Because yeah, you usually have a band, you have a stage. Like the Weeknd did that whole weird mirrors thing. It was a little too much for me. This was, yeah, a little disorienting at times, but also just like you marvel at the fact that this is what she was doing.
Now I'm wearing green in honor of the Eagles. Yeah, so I'm wearing their colors, but I was well, Kansas City's been my team for a very long time. Before Mahomes was with the team, and I've always liked that team. And in this event, they were not the favorite. And we can talk if you want. We can talk about the football game now. Um, I
Yeah,
have.
okay.
I'm going to give you a short recap of the game, and then you give me your counter to the short recap of the game. It's a game that started that looked like Philadelphia was going to run away with this game. KC's defense didn't know how to tackle. They couldn't tackle a tackling dummy. They were terrible. and Philadelphia was literally having their way with Kansas City. The second half started, and every possession that KC had, they scored. It was really two tales of two halves, and at the end, it was like I don't know whether air left the balloon of the Philadelphia Eagles when they saw that Mahomes was really injured, or at least looked like he was injured. And you and I had a conversation on the telephone, essentially suggesting that might have been let's say a football quarterback's version of a soccer player, and that almost seemed to put Philadelphia asleep.
Yeah, yeah, you could probably.
I mean, that happened, and Philadelphia in the second half looked to fall asleep.
Well, I think it's more so coaching. This came down to coaching, in my opinion.
Well, there's a lot of talk that you're right. Reed got a lot of credit for his offensive play calling.
The offensive play calling, the offensive line, the Eagles couldn't run the
The
ball.
Eagles' the defensive line did not play up to their ability, or didn't look like they did anyway.
Yeah, no,
They're much better defense than what we saw.
Yeah, no, it's like from what this game, like I I always say that the team that wins in the trenches is usually the team that's going to win the game. You can have the best receivers, you can have the best, uh, you know, you can have like the best tight ends, but unless you're going to win in those trenches, and if you're going to make the plays you're going to need to make, you're not going to really win a game like that. And the big difference: how many mistakes did Patrick Mahomes make?
None.
None. How many?
Yeah, none. I don't think he made any.
Made zero in terms of miss. Now, okay, he wasn't. He was.
We're not talking perfection here. We're talking about throwing an interception, dropping the
The ball.
football, the ball security thing. He was 100% in ball security. The same could not be said about, well,
Jalen Hurts.
it hurt.
Jalen Hurts had an incredible performance. Like, you can't take anything away from his performance except for the fumble.
Absolutely.
Everyone's talking about how this game ended, but let's be honest here. The fumble was, when you look at the point swings, the fumble was just as costly as a lot of other plays in this game.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, the team. I thought the Eagles were going to run the ball a lot better because I thought they had the better work in the trenches, and it turned out not to be the case because the Chiefs were even that much better at running the ball.
And don't forget, they laid back. They could have had a touchdown, and the 3 points makes it look a lot closer than it was. They really could have been ahead by a converted touchdown, but they decided to use the clock and do what football teams do. But here's to your point, as far as Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles are concerned, they played really well. If ball possession means anything, possession time, they had the ball 11 minutes longer than KC. And I'm looking here at the stats. KC at the end there, with Pacheco having a couple of runs for about 25 yards, they were behind in that that category. They ended up with 158, and Philly ended up with 115. But here's the part that must really hurt. Philly had 302 yards in passing. KC had 182. And all those things should have added up to a victory for Philadelphia, but it's the turnovers. It's the baked goods, right? I was at a place, David, where 2/3 of the people at the house watching the game were pro Philly. A third or less, maybe even 25%, were KC fans. And it was getting pretty wild at the end of the first half, and it got quiet in the second half. That's why it was something else.
Yeah, you're totally right. The crowd in the first half was just Like you heard the Eagles fans, especially the big touchdown that they threw to AJ Brown. The crowd just
What
went
a catch.
absolutely.
What a catch. The way
That
he hunted that ball down.
that right there is a receiver helping his quarterback because that's a
Oh, yeah.
50 ball and the defender just missed where the ball was going, and credit to AJ Brown for finding it.
That was a 50-50 ball that you could find. Never mind not the defender, where that ball went. The defender didn't have a clue at all.
No, and even AJ Brown kind of had to work his way to
Well,
it.
he really straightened things out, and he had he made a great play. That's why, in them getting him, that he's part of the reason why they had a shot at the Super Bowl. He's the biggest addition they put on that team, and he was full value for what they've, what they wanted when they brought him in. They got everything they wanted.
So the funny thing is that I was listening to what a lot of the analysts down south were saying, especially on ESPN, and everyone was talking about how Jalen Hurts went through probably one of the best turnarounds a quarterback has ever gone through from one year to another, like
Yeah,
total 180. And I agree, he was incredible this season, but let's not discount the fact that I think this is probably the best assembly of an offense when you look at talent from top to bottom that you could give a quarterback. Like you get a number one truly elite receiver that you get from the draft for basically a draft pick, which was just a big mistake from Tennessee in the beginning. Then you have your I call it your stud top 10 receiver that you picked a couple years ago, and I think it was last year, Devonta Smith, who took a huge step. I mean, this season because he's not asked to be the number one with AJ Brown there. Dallas Goddard, he's the reason why they were able to move off from Zach Ertz and trade him away. And then you just need to make sure you have other guys that can make plays. And then, but the thing is the running game was probably the only thing that let them down.
and it was the thing that worked out okay for them to begin with.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
kind of
Jalen
fell
Hurts.
apart. It fell apart in the second half.
Yeah, that's where I was so like because the pressure that Mahomes and the Chiefs were putting on them, they felt like they had to try to keep the defense on the toes. But what they like as soon as I saw the running game get going for the Chiefs, I'm like, ooh, they figured something out here because the pass rush, they know that Kansas City's got to make up a lot of points. They're going to be throwing the ball more. So what does Kansas City do? Is like, well, we're not going to give them a chance to get to Patrick Mahomes. So they went with a lot of quick throws. They went with a lot of runs, and they have a lot of guys that can run the ball for Kansas City. And what the Eagles didn't do was wear down the defense. The defense didn't really have to work so hard in that second half. Yeah, the Eagles did make some plays. They did have to kind of
AC did not look good. The DBs in the second half there was a complete turnaround. That
yeah.
defense was for KC was a complete turnaround. They were getting great coverage, and Jalen Hurts was also having trouble finding a place to run. I give him more credit for being more mobile than Mahomes. I would even probably say that maybe even if Mahomes was healthy, and they really did shut down his ability to run for first downs, which basically is one of the reasons why Philly won so many games.
Yeah, I mean, he had the 3 rushing touchdowns, but you know, he was kind of doing a little bit more on his own near the end there. And obviously, I think maybe they had to be a little conservative because he still was dealing with that shoulder injury. It
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
fully 100%. So, I credit him. He made some big throws down the field, but at the same time, I think they also knew there was a bit of a limitation. He still threw for 300 yards. Like,
Yeah,
no,
300 and change.
but I still think it's because the other running backs, like he had more yards himself than the other 3 running backs had combined for Philly.
Yeah, he did. And just imagine in the second half, he hardly ran at all. I mean, what he would have done. in a full game of having that ability. But KC figured out a way to shut down the receivers and his ability to escape the pocket and go for a serious amount of yards. On the other hand, the injured Mahomes made a couple of plays like down the middle of the field, 25 yards, and
Yep.
he made a couple of plays that extended the possession. And he did this all. And let's not forget this. One of the reasons why I was worried, because I was pulling for Kansas City, I totally admit it. One of the things that I was concerned about is Travis Kelce, great receiver, but without Tyreek Hill in the fold. They were missing their best receiver. This is the guy who last year in the playoffs was basically, almost as valuable as Mahomes, and they didn't have him in this game.
Well, and that was kind of the biggest question mark going into the season was could Travis Kelce now as the true number one target handle the extra attention, and he certainly did. And then the question was who's going to step up behind. And I think what the Chiefs did well was, well, we're not going to look to one guy to do it, right? When you look at their stats here, they didn't need to run, they didn't need to throw the ball that much because obviously they had the fumble touchdown, which took some pressure off the offense. Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy who's been there before in terms of coming up as a target. Other than that, like they did not need to do what the Eagles did, which was go for those big throw plays. Just take what the defense is giving you.
There's another thing that we really, really did see. I don't know if it was a shoulder or he just doesn't have an arm. We saw two plays in that game where Hurts was going deep and he came up 20 yards short. I mean, I'm not talking 5 yards. I'm not talking 3 yards. I'm talking 20 yards short.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
Health
that had
must have
something
been
to
an
do.
issue.
I think that it's had something to do with the injury for
Like
sure.
the Hail Mary turned into a real it wasn't a Hail Mary.
No, and I didn't think they were going to be able to do the Hail Mary. I don't know.
They tried, but the throw went nowhere near. I mean, it was such a short throw, not even the defense could get it.
Yeah.
It was that short.
Well, and like you look at the fact that the returner had to go down early when he was taking the ball at the end there because just the time on the clock. He had no room to run and try to maybe inch that a little bit closer. So like that the time on the clock was certainly an issue there at the end. And obviously we know why that was an issue there at the end because of the penalty that pretty much took a minute off the clock at the end there and allowed Kansas City to run it down close to like what? By the time the field goal was kicked, there was about 5 seconds, 8 seconds left in the game. So,
yeah, no, I have to say it was a great game, and there's a lot of room for Jalen Hurts to improve. He had what you said was the biggest improvement in a season from last year to this year. He had a shoulder injury that I think was impactful on his season finale. If the Super Bowl being, the whole reason why you play all those other games.
mm-hmm.
We'll see how he comes back healthy. And now, on the other hand, we have Mahomes who came in with a more obvious and more, I don't know if you want to call it a more impactful injury, being his ankle.
Yeah.
He played really well. And now with this second Super Bowl, 5 years with the team, 5 AFC championships, a lot of people are already starting to deign him the next Tom Brady. Now, I guess, it's a good start to be a Tom Brady for sure. But that's 8 Super Bowls. We're at 2. That's 6 more Super Bowls. He's 27 now. That makes him 33 if he wins one every year.
Well, right now, I mean, the best comparison is, you're looking close to like the Joe Montana in terms of comparisons, like
where he's at. Absolutely.
where he's at right now. I understand that they want to get
striking distance
Go ahead.
of Joe Montana.
Yeah, no, and when I look at, him trying to get to Brady, you brought it up. Like, he's got to have to do this for a long time, partly because
In a hurry.
teams are going to catch up to him. Teams are going to catch up to the Chiefs. Like, you look at the quarterbacks there, Joe Burrow. Like, it could have been one or the other in the Super Bowl. Josh Allen, I mean, the Bills are hoping they'll get theirs, if they're at full strength and make some adjustments, they hope they can get there. And I mean, is there another team? I would say, I mean, and maybe the Chargers, if they eventually get their act together, can also get
The
there.
Patriots, they didn't look bad.
When I look at the quarterbacks, the Patriots are lower on the totem pole. Like, they're not way far off, but they got to make some massive.
Miami.
I'm not sold on Miami just because
I'm just throwing names out there.
I know, but like, I'm looking at like you have the three-headed monster in the AFC between the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. Maybe close to them could be if Trevor Lawrence can get there, and if the Jaguars continue on their trajectory, they're another team. And then like, the AFC is going to be such a tough conference comparison to what we saw in the NFC, which was, I mean, it would have been shocking if the Eagles did not go to the Super Bowl. They were that much better in terms of talent.
Does San Francisco impress more with a quarterback? Like, I mean, they had no quarterback. If they would have had their number 3 still in there, I think they would have made a battle of it. They would have made a battle of it, but it did end up kind of inconsequential. And unfortunately, realistic people like you and I, if I can add you to that group,
sure,
it is what it is. San Francisco doesn't have a starting quarterback, and that's until we see them with a starting quarterback. San Francisco, they need a starting quarterback. Now we'll see what health does for them. The NFC is full of teams that should do better, but don't. But do have some teams like the Giants who can surprise you, but they're not going to be predictably good. They're going to do the same thing they did this year until their team develops the kind of confidence and their quarterback, does the kind of stuff. So I agree with you with the NFC not having. We don't see them on the cusp of having really great quarterbacks and really great dominant teams like we do the AFC. And it is because of what you said. It's the quarterbacks that stir the drink.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you are going to try to win a Super Bowl, if you don't have the quarterback play, like, I don't know what, like, it's been proven. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Okay, maybe Eli Manning is the outlier in some cases. Like, there are some outliers there, but you look at the ones who are consistently there and consistently battling at the end. Your quarterback has to be the guy. This is why the Bills will get there once Josh Allen gets them there. The even with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson wants to be the guy. He's going to have to be the
some injuries have gotten in his way.
Right. Look at the NFC. You look at Kirk Cousins.
There you go.
He's always like that. He is the prime example of what it means when you don't have your quarterback there. Tom Brady, one of his worst playoff performances.
But he still played well. Like his arm was there for the team. He didn't have a running attack, and he didn't have a defense that played championship football.
Or an offensive line.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he was passing based on running for his life.
I look at what the recipe of success had been for New England throughout their dynasty, which was really good work in the trenches. Tom Brady had that running game that he can go to, that running back that he could always rely on, the big target in Rob Gronkowski, and then the small target that could make something out of
I'm,
nothing.
I'm waiting for I'm waiting for the most important reason,
Oh, and the head
and
coach.
it isn't Tom Brady.
It's the head, what, Bill Belichick?
The big plays that New England would make. How many big plays have we seen? We saw catches bouncing off people, and they had big play guys. And you mentioned one, and I'm sorry, his name is eluding me now. The receiver, the small guy.
Oh, Julian Edelman.
Yes, Julian Edelman. Every playoff, he would make at least one or two plays that you'd go, "How the heck did he do that?" And he would do it at a very consequential time in the game. And I think with Kansas City, as much as we want to pat Mahomes on the back, pun intended, I didn't mean it. Um, for me, it was Pacheco. When they handed Pacheco the ball, the running game was non-existent. And then he went and he got a few great rushes. And in the middle of those great rushes, he had two of those first down rushes for plus 10 yards.
Mhm.
And he created this confidence in the team, and he gave Mahomes some breathing room. And he helped the receivers because now they had to think about the running game. And we know in football, if you've got a running game, the defense isn't as effective against the receivers when that happens. Establishing that in a championship game when you have the kind of defense that Philadelphia is, for you to short wire that defense, your offense had to really be chugging, and it needed a running game. And to me, Pacheco, I know he wasn't the MVP, David, but I'll tell you, at the TSN turning point, if you use that, to me, he was the TSN turning point.
Yeah, I mean, he also. I don't know if you saw the hit he took.
Oh, yes, I saw the hit he took. I felt the hit he took.
I was just like like it looked. I didn't know if he was going to be able to stay in the game because that's how
He got right back up.
he got right back up. He took him. I think he kind of took a bit of a breather, and then he
Oh,
came
yeah.
back. But because the funny enough, like Pacheco
He's a
was
rookie, right?
he was a rookie. He
Ah.
wasn't viewed as a top draft. Like he wasn't a top draft pick. Do you know when he was drafted?
I think it was, I want to say the fourth round.
7th round.
Wow. Wow.
7th round. Their
Wow.
top
And he's not your typical running back because he's not very big.
no, and their top running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was their first round pick in 2020, didn't play this.
Yeah, didn't get the play, didn't get a touch.
I think he made. I think he played a couple. I think he played a few games. Like he didn't. I'm trying to remember now. I know that he missed time with an injury. Um, I think he played 10 games this year. Maybe I'm a mistake. I'm thinking of a different season, different player. But he missed the rest of the season. They were thinking maybe he could get into this game, but they didn't need him. But that's what the Kansas City Chiefs had, I think, close to 7 rookies, 6 or 7 rookies starting.
Absolutely.
That right there, when Patrick Mahomes signed that mega deal he signed, everyone's like, then now we're gonna see Kansas City really struggle to keep these going. When you can draft and when you can plug guys in, it does not matter.
Next man up.
Next man up, right? They get Juju Smith-Schuster who comes in for well, he's not the one that replaced Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill. Nobody replaces Tyreek Hill.
They get Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's with the Green Bay Packers. He proves to provide that kind of down the field target that they were looking for. Kadarius Toney, who had, you want to talk about turning points, that punt return that set them up for that.
Oh my goodness, was that incredible or what? I mean, he was like 6 inches from being downed, and then turned around.
Yeah, and he was acquired in a trade with the Giants. He was a first round pick in 2021. The Giant didn't work with the Giants. They traded him for basically a two mid draft picks, and he provides the kind of the spark there. And
But you're highlighting exactly what when I was saying about New England, and not to take away from Brady, right? But that's what you need to win championships. You need a couple of players on your team to do something special. And what he did was special, very special. And like I said about Pacheco, same thing. That's the Edelman thing I was talking about, right? You need to do that. Unfortunately for Philly, they didn't have anybody make a big play.
What I'll also add, what was odd about the
Or
punt
not.
in general was the Eagles actually deciding to punt it. That was the one thing the Eagles did not want to do in this game was punt the football. They wanted to go for it. 4th and 2, and you punt the football. I'm sorry, Eagles fans are going to complain, and we haven't even gone to the big play of the game. But
Well, can we? You
I'm
want to save that, or you want to get? You mentioned it now, and I'd like to set it aside in my opinion and put it like this. I
okay,
agree with the coach. Sirianni was right. There were a lot of things that happened that lost this game, not that last play.
yes,
That's not what lost the game.
that punt. That's why I brought up the punt. That right there, if
That
Eagles,
was one.
that was one. The fumble was another. A lot of times,
Unable to get a 3-and-out in the second half.
yeah, every possession they scored. You're not winning games like that. I'm like you can blame the refs for that call, and everyone has their opinions on it.
David, that wouldn't have been a penalty in the Canadian Football League.
It wouldn't have been it would not have been a penalty.
And
And
why?
pardon?
And why? Why wouldn't it be, in your opinion? We talked about it, so you can use my answer.
Well, because in the CFL you can review those.
Review them, and it is important that the part of the way that penalty has to be called is if the player would have had a chance to get the ball.
Oh, that
And
one as well.
right? Because in the CFL, that wouldn't have been a penalty.
Well,
What he did would have been a penalty in the CFL, but it would have been waved off in the referee's mind if that ball, he determined that ball, or she determined that ball was not catchable. And I don't think it was. I don't think it was catchable.
So it was a penalty because of the rule, and the player admitted it was a rule.
Yep.
And now people are saying it was not called during the game, and
It was not.
why it was ticky tacky because it was called at that point of the game. And that's exactly why it was called at that point in the game. You and I talked about this.
We
Imagine
agree 100%. Like I said, I'm trying to be the devil's advocate. It probably wasn't a penalty if by CFL standards. NFL standards, different story. But earlier in the game, a Philadelphia player did the same thing to a Kansas City receiver, and it wasn't a penalty. Earlier in the game, the exact play around the waist, grabbing the waist and slowing the guy down. Your point, and the fans who say that, they're right in the sense that, well, why wouldn't he have called it the first time? Or why are you calling a marginal penalty at the end of the game? Now this is the same argument we both agree with. So I don't know. We have to call somebody to get a different opinion. But if it's a penalty, it's a penalty. And you can't say not calling it affects the game, doesn't affect the game, because not calling it affects the game just as much as calling it does.
So that's my issue with it, is that they say, well, the refs decided the game. Either way, I think if that penalty does not get called, it still impacts the game, because now Kansas City has to kick the ball. And there's an extra minute there on the clock. So the Eagles have a chance to go down, and maybe they look to tie it, or maybe they look to win it. But it changes the entire outcome of the game. Now, do I believe referees should dictate the outcome of the game? Absolutely not. But it's also on the players to not take penalties.
Well, to
Like,
not give the referee a chance to call the
yeah,
penalty. You
right?
can't assume you can do something and you're going to get away with it.
Exactly.
That's your point. That's my point. You can't do something and go, well, it's at the end of the game, so I'll take the chance and there won't be a penalty, so I'm not worried about it. And then complain because there's a penalty called. That player admitted, don't forget, he admitted it was a penalty. He downright admitted it. The class aspect of the Philadelphia Eagles is amazing because the coach said the same thing. They didn't whine about it. I admire what they did. I'm not sure the Philly fans will agree with them.
No,
Um,
not at all.
but But the kids get an extra 2 hours before they have to go to school in Philly. So, that was a good thing too. Today they didn't have to show up for 2 hours. They had extra 2 hours before
They
showing
should
up
have
for
made that a
class.
day of mourning at that rate. Um, what I will say about the whole situation of when it was called, like if it wasn't called a penalty, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I would not have made a big deal about it because unless like the
I wouldn't have
Eagles,
either.
like you think about me, when calls go their way, the Eagles in the NFC Championship game when the catch was ruled a catch, but it wasn't a catch because the player didn't secure the football, and the Eagles went on to score a touchdown, and you know how the rest of that game goes against San Francisco. But in this sort of situation here, we've talked so much about the refs getting the call right. And we're going to
Absolutely.
ridicule the refs for getting the call right just because of the time. This is where I really hate it because we can't say the penalty shouldn't be called because of the timing of the game. That
No.
means that means the even smallest call, like a hold. Let's say the offensive lineman held someone. Now, if it's really egregious, they're going to call it. Let's say it's ticky tacky, as we have been calling this penalty. Would people been talking about the same thing? You got to let the players battle it out. Why are you calling a hold on the offensive lineman? It's. I think it's a little bit of a double standard here because it's the Chiefs, and a lot of people did not want the Chiefs to win, and because yes, I understand that the ball likely wasn't going to be caught, but you can't say for certain either.
No, you can't. Look, it, all you're saying is, and I obviously agree with it, but I could take the devil's advocate. But what you're saying, I agree with because making a call or not making a call has an impact on the game. They both have an impact on the game. They both do. If you don't call a penalty, if you do call a penalty, if you call a penalty that isn't a penalty, that has an effect on the game. If you don't call a penalty that's a penalty, that impacts the game. When you have a penalty that goes either way, it goes both ways. Then the problem there isn't that the referee calls it. The problem is that a player took that chance and lost. That's the problem. To be the devil's advocate here, if I'm a Philly fan and I want to look at that, um, you know, I would say post and the NFL may have to make a thought about it because one thing that does happen is there's a lot of conversations and the NFL changes rules all the time. And don't be surprised because they creep into the world of the CFL and the rules that are made in our league
Yep.
and they use them, adopt them after we do. And don't be surprised the next thing the NFL talks about is on that play. The referee has to make a conscious decision. Is it a playable ball? If it's not a playable ball, I can't call the penalty. I just can't call the penalty. I can't punish the player because he did something that didn't affect the play. That's my devil's advocate version here when I talk about it from a Philly Eagle fan perspective. That ball was not catchable, therefore it shouldn't have been a penalty by Canadian Football League standards. And I'm telling you, in the coming months, we're going to hear about that play because it's very famous now, right? And nobody should ever think that the NFL isn't forward thinking. They just move slowly. It's not that they don't move; they just move slowly, and they need a little push once in a while. And this call in this instance in this game is going to attract some attention with the league people who make decisions on penalties. That's my prediction.
Frank, let's not forget the reason why pass interference became reviewable in the NFL. The NFC Championship game where the New Orleans Saints. Now, if we want to talk about botched calls, that game against the New Orleans Saints, where it was a clear as day pass interference
Totally.
that goes uncalled in the end zone, and then it forced the NFL to say, there's something not right here. We need to make a fix. This is what the CFL does because literally they took that same principle and adopted it in the NFL.
Hamilton, Montreal
Yep.
playoff game. That's
Right.
why the rule came in. A team got jobbed, and they didn't want to. They didn't want to do it again. Now, a league and the officials can make a mistake, but once they start repeating the same mistake,
Mhm.
That's a problem. And that's why I say it is predictable in my mind that something will be done about that play, and the pass interference will be modified to adjust a referee's thinking to take into consideration, I repeat, is the ball catchable?
Yeah. And what I think here too is the last thing the NFL wants is for anybody to question the integrity of the game of the league.
They make some good money off gambling.
They do. Now,
And the gamblers will want, like, they're the main group that are really, like, they're the ones that are going to remember that call because it's going to hurt them where it hurts all of us the most, our
yep.
back pocket.
Funny enough, if we brought up gambling. Nate Burleson. I wish I had seen this clip. He predicted that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to win the game.
Okay.
He said Patrick Mahomes was going to win Super Bowl MVP, and he said the score was going to be 38-35 Chiefs.
Okay.
He hit on all three. You know how
And
hard it is to predict a final score in a football game? You know how
I
much money I could have made if or somebody could have made if if Nate Burleson had put money on him on his predictions, he would have been laughing to the bank. I did pretty well on my best this week. I'll tell you that.
well, I'm happy for you. I didn't win anything at the game at
Did
the
you do the
party I was at.
squares?
Yeah, they did a bunch of squares, lots of different squares. Temperature,
So
first touchdown,
there's a
total
touchdown
points
part.
at the end of the first quarter.
We used to do those we used to do those at a Super Bowl party I used to go to every year. It's funny because the biggest gambling faux pas of the night was everybody who picked the Eagles running back to score the first touchdown. It was great odds, like between 16-1 to 20-1. And his touchdown gets overturned because his elbow was short of the goal line.
Ay,
That cost one person I know. They put down, I think, $50, and I would have paid out like $900.
ay, ay, ay.
So
That
this is
sounds painful.
it's painful. That's why I didn't bet on things like that. I could not. I couldn't. But when you look at the NFL knows exactly like this. They said this was one of the people are saying this was the worst season of NFL officiating. I felt like that one play shouldn't overlook the fact that that game was called pretty well. I had no complaints about the officiating in that game. I've had complaints about officiating in a lot of other games. So I think the NFL will look at this, and I think they look at everything. And there's no way they're not going to look at this game and say, "Can we do something better here?" There's no way
Yeah,
that.
and it's not about being politically correct. It's about appearing to pacify the interests of the people who call into question the way the game is officiated,
Yeah.
and the way the rules are, acted on. That's the league office. That's the league office. That's their responsibility. Any failure, um, the integrity of the game. You're right, and that's very important. And the NFL has never shied away from betting and ensuring that they create a game that can be betted on, that people can gamble on, and feel comfortable doing it. And as I said before, and I repeat that penalty made some gamblers feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Neither do I.
I don't blame them, but at the same time, these are the risks you take when you gamble. And
Absolutely.
I still think the better team came out victorious at the end.
I think so too.
Just based on they kept it close in the first half, even though they were losing, they kept it close. And then the second half, this is the Kansas City Chiefs MO. And until somebody's able to put away Patrick Mahomes for good, like the one team that was able to stop him, you look at these last few years, Tom Brady's Bucks when they won, right? That was them shutting down Patrick Mahomes.
and their ability to make the big play. And we know that the Super Bowl and every championship game in any sport comes down to the big plays, the special plays. Those are the ones, because when you have two teams that are playing for a championship, you have two teams that play the game well in different ways. And you can pretty much, the only way you can separate them is when one does something. Well, we do the Canadian Football League here usually. We saw a Grey Cup that was the definition of big plays becoming the reason why a team wins. We saw multiple big plays. That's what happens when you have really good teams up against each other at the end of the year for all the marbles, because there's no saving yourself for the next game. There's no hiding plays. The playbook was wide open in the Grey Cup. It was wide open in the Super Bowl. And what we saw wide open, the KC Chiefs had a better offensive playbook. That's the way I see this game. That's my summary of why they won.
Yeah.
Never mind the penalty.
The better team made the better adjustments and they managed the game a lot better.
They sure did. They did a marvelous job. And, it's been a good run of, Super Bowls. There was a long time there 20 years ago when the games were all crap. They've become a lot better. They really have. And it's already an event. The halftime show, the commercials, everything about the NFL is all about jam, right? And the game was the weak link, and the last 20 years it hasn't been.
No, I don't disagree with that.
What do you see? We live near Buffalo. They come out as the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year. The odds came out right away, and they're the favorite. And Kansas City's like fourth or fifth.
For me, Buffalo's gonna have to figure out a way to manage. They gotta find ways to not rely on, why am I blanking? They're gonna on Josh Allen. They can't rely on him to win the game. They have to.
Absolutely. If nobody's figured out what I think needs to happen, it's for Buffalo too. I spoke of a template. The template is, if you're going to depend on one player to make the big play to win the championship game, or win on the way to the championship, win a big playoff game, you're not going to win. You need a handful of guys that just do something special. It can be in defense too. Interceptions. We saw a fumble recovery. We saw an interception. All those things affect the game. There's not a single player we saw a missed field goal. There's not a single player that can't be impactful and help to be a part of why their team wins the big game at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true.
Well, David, it was a thrill. I hope you made a lot of money.
I did all right.
All right. For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Football Talk, CFL Talks Substitute. Airing live Mondays at 9 p.m., today at 10 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, Football Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank.